for our first Ageless Educator, we have Dr. Michael Smith. He will be joining us on our streaming. And Dr. Smith hosted Healthy Talk on RadioMD.com. He is the author of The Supplement Pyramid, 9 Pillars of Weight Loss, and Curious About Curcumin. Dr. Smith is often seen as an expert on broadcast media, appeared in many television shows, such as The Suzanne Show and Know the Cause health shows. He is also heard on various national health radio shows and been a guest lecturer for numerous anti-aging organizations nationwide. And Dr. Michael Smith will be talking about reversing immunosenescence, an overlooked step for the fight against aging. So please help me welcome Dr. Michael Smith.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here again. It's been a few months, and so, with today's lecture, I think we'll just get right into it. Reversing immunosenescence. It's one of the topics that we don't always talk about a lot, and that, of course, is our immune system and how important it is to not just overall health, but how it directly relates to longevity, both in a negative way if you don't take care of it, and also in a positive way if you do. So let's go ahead and just get right into the slides. I'm showing you this slide because it represents all the different types of immune cells that your bone marrow produces. You have, on the left side, you have natural killer cells, which are a part of the immune system that's just kind of ready to attack. And then, of course, you got your B cells and your T cells. I think most of you are familiar with those. I'm showing you this simply so you understand that at the end of the day, as you age, if these cells remain healthy and they function at an optimal level, there's a good chance you're going to impact longevity in a very positive way. On the flip side, if you're not taking care of yourself and doing the things that I know you guys do, but most people don't, most people are not eating and exercising like they should, these immune cells don't function as well. They drop in number, they drop in function, and it really has become a research interest for us here at Life Extension about how does a failing immune system affect a lot of the aging and anti-aging pathways that we are identifying that occur inside each cell. I liked this article. I highly suggest if you can get it, go ahead and read it. It's from the current Aging Science Journal. It's titled The Role of the Immune System in Aging and Longevity. It was from 2011, but it's a great review. And I just wanted to read to you the author's opinion about how the immune system is connected to longevity. So I'm just going to read this quote straight out to you. The immune system seems to be involved in the chronic oxidative and inflammatory stress conditions of aging. It has been proposed that several age-related changes in immune cell functions, which depend on the redox state of these cells, could be good markers of health, biological age, and longevity. I like this because this was really one of the first reviews by Dr. Fernandez. I think he's out of the University of Mexico. I'd have to double check that, but or the University of Mexico City. But I really like what he's saying here, and it was really from this point in 2011 that as a company, as a longevity company, Life Extension really became interested in helping longevity enthusiasts like yourself reverse some of the changes in the immune system that might have a negative effect on your healthy lifespan. So this was kind of a starting point for many of us in the longevity field. So what I'd like to cover today are powerful solutions to stay one step ahead of culprits that compromise your immune response. And remember, if we can keep the immune response healthy and youthful, that is going to have a positive impact overall on longevity. So before we can go any further, I need to define for you what is immune senescence or immunosenescence. You can say it either way. I think, as most of you are aware, the word senescence just simply means dying off, getting weaker, losing function. And so when we say immune senescence, that's exactly what we mean. The immune system, as we age, loses function. It loses not only the number of healthy white blood cells or immune cells, but also how they function. But through some really good research over the past few years, life extension has been able to kind of clearly define 4 key aspects of an aging, dying immune system. And it's these 4 parts, these 4 components that we want to reverse with targeted nutrition. And the good news is we have, through the research, found nutrients that can reverse these steps of immunosenescence. So the first thing that happens when the immune system starts to die off a little bit is you lose a very important type of cell called an NK cell. That stands for natural killer cell. You saw that on that previous slide. A natural killer cell is so critical to a strong immune response. These are basically like your frontline soldiers. These cells are primed, they're locked and loaded, they're ready to fight. And if we want to remain healthy and have a robust immune response, we need a lot of these cells. Well, one of the first things that happens in immunosenescence, a dying immune system, is you lose the number and the quality of the natural killer cells. It's not just really losing them in number that happens, but it's also the ones that are there remaining in your bloodstream. They're just not as strong as they used to be. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is the loss of naive cells, or some people call this the loss of native cells. These are immune cells that are brand new, that are being produced from the bone marrow. So if you go back and think to that last slide or a couple slides ago where I had the bone marrow at the top, broken down to all the different types of immune cells, the bone marrow is supposed to be producing these new, naive immune cells at a pretty consistent rate. But again, one of the things we noticed in our research is that immunosenescence is characterized by number 2, which is less and less, fewer and fewer of these brand new immune cells being produced. Number 3 is a very interesting one here. Number 3 is the buildup of old memory cells. And so I have to just go back and explain a little bit about the power of the immune system. As many of you are probably aware, when you're exposed to an infection, bacterial, viral, it doesn't really matter. When you're exposed to something foreign in your body, your immune system can recognize that that's not you, it's not yourself. That bacteria doesn't belong there, that virus doesn't belong there, or even that cancer cell doesn't belong there, and the immune system responds to that. Well, just in case you get hit by that bacteria or that virus or that same cancer later in life, the immune cell has an amazing, powerful ability to remember or have a memory of those past insults, those past infections. And it does so with the buildup of these memory cells. These are basically cells that are there to remember past infections. Sounds great, right? Well, in our research, it turns out that most of the infections that you were hit with in childhood, teenage year, in your younger 20s, you are never going to see those viruses and bacteria again. The reason is viruses and bacteria, they mutate a lot. So you have a lot of memory cells from past infections that really aren't doing anything. They're not really protecting you from reinfection because the chance of that happening is very, very low. But it turns out these memory cells aren't just floating around your bloodstream innocently. They can be powerful pro-inflammatory cells. So the buildup of memory cells may sound good on one level, but as we get older, it's really not that great. These old memory cells cause problems like inflammation and oxidative stress. That's number 3. Number 4 is critical. In your immune response to an infection, let's say you have pneumonia, you're about to catch the flu or whatever it is, I think you can appreciate that there needs to be activation of the immune system, right? So you get hit with the bacteria, that's going to cause a problem. Or a virus gets into your sinus cavity, it's going to cause a problem. Obviously, your immune system needs to be turned on, right? Your immune system needs to be activated. And in that process of activation, the immune system produces types of T cells called T helper cells. These are cells that play a critical role in orchestrating that activation and that attack against a virus or a bacteria. That's critically important. However, when the infection is done, when your immune system has won that battle, we also now need to calm everything down. And there are types of T cells called suppressor cells that have that job. So you want a nice balance in life. If you want a healthy immune system, you need a nice balance of the helpers that can activate the immune system and the suppressors that turn it off when everything is okay. So there's a nice balance. But as we get older, what we have found is we have less of those activators, the helper cells, and we have too many of the suppressor cells. So we're not able to respond to infections as well as we should as we get older. So that's known as number 4. It's a low helper suppressor ratio, meaning the helper or activators are down, the suppressors are up too much, and that's not a good thing. So these 4 components of immunosenescence has come from recent research. Life Extension was involved in a lot of that research. And what we want to do then, if we've identified these 4 things causing our immune system to start to die off as we get older, these are the 4 things that we want to reverse. So let's take a look at how we're going to go ahead and do that. Just one slide, just so we have a better idea of, I had mentioned the naive cells or the native cells, these brand new cells, and I mentioned memory cells. I just wanted to make sure we're clear on those definitions. Again, if you look to the left of the screen here, native cells or naive cells, these are brand new cells that are produced by the bone marrow, right? These are new immune cells that are ready to respond to new invaders. And it's important that our bone marrow is producing these brand new cells at a nice consistent rate even as we get older, but that doesn't happen. As I mentioned, these cells begin to drop with age, and that really does hamper our ability to respond to an infection as we get older. And then that's compared to, or in contrast to, what are memory cells. Remember, those are the cells that are able to respond to past infections, right? That is an important thing. But again, the chance of being infected by a virus or a bacteria that looks exactly the same as it did 20, 30 years ago is incredibly rare. And it turns out these memory cells really aren't doing much other than causing problems like inflammation and oxidative stress. So immunosenescence can be pretty much described here right on this slide. That new cells are going down and the memory cells are getting too high, and we need to reverse that process or that balance. So here's the research that we did at Life Extension. We were able to identify 3 really powerful plant-based, in one case, mushroom-based compounds that have shown to be quite effective at reversing immunosenescence in those 4 components or 4 characteristics that I described. I want you to also understand too why this is important. At this point, in the allopathic side of medicine, in the conventional side of medicine, there's really no pharmacology out there that can address immunosenescence at this point. So we really are relying on nature in this case to help us remain strong in our immune system and have a positive impact on longevity. So looking left to right, we're going to talk about sustanche. I'll tell you what that is coming up. Some of you might know, I don't know, but we're going to talk about the plant sustanche. We're going to talk about pu-erh, and then we're going to talk about reishi mushroom. I'm going to start with sustanche. Let's look at how this desert plant can affect the immune system for us in a positive way. Sustanche has really been used in Chinese medicine for many years. It's interesting. They are what is considered a parasitic species, sustanche. The plant itself lacks chlorophyll, and so it gets its nutrients and its water through a root system by sucking it away from other plants. It's funny how this virulent plant actually is positive for us when it comes to the immune system. It is also known as the ginseng of the desert, and it has high concentrations of the same compounds you find in echinacea are found in sustanche, but at, believe it or not, a higher concentration. So we have echinacea-like compounds in high concentration in this desert plant, this ginseng of the desert, this parasitic plant, which I find very, very cool for some reason. I don't know. Here's what we know. This is how sustanche helps to restore immunocompetence. So reversing immunosenescence and becoming immunocompetent as we age. Sustanche has been shown to stimulate production of brand new T cells. That's one form of immune cell that's very important to a healthy immune response. Remember, we talked about those. And sustanche has a direct effect on the bone marrow. And it seems, and we're still trying to figure this out, but it seems that it has the most effect on cells that are developing to become T cells versus, say, B cells or natural killer cells. Sustanche has been shown to restore normal apoptosis. That's programmed cell death in aging memory cells. So right here, this one desert parasitic plant is targeting two key things we need to target. We need to have more new cells and less memory cells. Remember, sustanche is able to cause apoptosis in memory cells. So it helps us to get a better balance now of new cell production and memory cell levels. And that's important in remaining immune competent. And that's really my last bullet point there. It recreates the balance between new cells and memory cells that we actually can clearly measure in younger subjects. So here you have a plant, a desert plant called sustanche that does have an ability by itself to revert back to a youthful immune response, which I think you can appreciate will have an amazing positive impact on longevity overall. The last little bottom part there, as I said, it reduces inflammation. That's important too. Remember, when you have high levels of memory cells, right? They're waiting for those past infections, but you're not going to be hit by them. Again, those memory cells cause problems like chronic inflammation. So by reducing the population of memory cells, sustanche is able to directly affect systemic chronic inflammation. That's critical, right? We teach here at Life Extension inflammation. Chronic systemic inflammation is the common denominator of all age-related diseases. So it's very important that we're able to reduce overall inflammation with sustanche. I'm going to go over now and talk about reishi. I'm sure many of you are familiar with reishi mushroom. I've actually had it as a tea once, reishi tea, and I will never do that again. It was, quite honestly, one of the worst things I've ever done. Very bitter. The taste lasted for, honestly, I want to say many days. It was just horrible. So it is better to go ahead and take a capsule, in my opinion, of reishi. But if you're brave, give it a try. I guess some people do drink it. I don't know, but it was not a pleasant experience. So let's talk about reishi. This has been known as the mushroom of immortality. It's used in traditional Chinese medicine. You know, I'm able to find information that goes back at least 2,000 years. So yeah, it must be doing something for us, right? There are over 5,000 studies documenting the broad spectrum benefits of reishi mushroom. And I put that in there because, you know, as a medical doctor, but a medical doctor who practices integrative medicine and incorporates lifestyle, exercise, nutrition, supplements, you know, I still fight on a daily basis the idea from conventional doctors, some of them my friends, that All of these nutrients I talk about and teach about from life extension and the research we do, just isn't supported. There's no research to support reishi. Yeah, maybe it's been used for 2,000 years, but there's no, research to really support its use today. And that's just not true. Again, over 5,000 studies on reishi mushrooms showing positive benefit from consuming this. So what does reishi do for the immune system? Well, it's actually quite a broad effect in the immune system, but I want to talk about it today because of one primary thing that it does, and it does it very, very well. Reishi mushroom is well established in the literature to increase natural killer cells significantly. That's important. Remember, the natural killer cells, we talked about them. Those are those frontline soldiers. And one of the characteristics of immunosenescence, a decaying old immune system, is loss of the natural killer cells. If you're going to take reishi, take it. And the best thing it's doing for you, it's increasing those frontline soldiers. And the research has shown that it's not just increasing the natural killer cell number, it also is enhancing the natural killer cell's ability to kill, which is what you want that cell to do. So reishi is powerful for many reasons, but honestly, at the end of the day, this is why I take reishi. It's building my frontline defenses up. Now, I want you to look here, this word down here at the bottom of the slide, triterpenes. I have that there because if you want to just eat raw reishi, or God forbid, drink reishi tea, whatever, if you want to do that, that's fine. I actually don't think you're going to get much effect in the immune system from the raw whole reishi or from a tea. That's because the key compounds in reishi that are associated in the research with the ability to enhance natural killer cell number and function are compounds called triterpenes. So you really want to do a supplement, in my opinion, here. And you want to do a supplement that has on that back label, it should say reishi mushroom, and it should tell you that it's standardized to about 5 to 10% of the triterpenes. It's that 5 to 10% standardization that's actually going to give you the effect you want in the immune system. If you don't see that, whatever reishi supplement product you're taking, or tea or whole food, if you don't see that word on the label, you're probably not going to get the immune benefit that you're trying to get from reishi. So make sure you have the 5 to 10% triterpenes. Now, the last one I wanted to talk about, and this is where I wanted to spend more time with, is something known as pu-erh. So let's talk about what this is and why I'm reserving this as the last one to talk about, because the science here is just fantastic. In case you don't know, pu-erh tea is a traditionally fermented tea that has been consumed by emperors and kings for longevity for thousands of years. It is native to a certain area in China. It is the same plant, basically, of green tea, Camellia sinensis, right? It's the same plant, but it's how the plant is harvested and how it's processed that gives you the different varieties of tea. So let me show you. Oh, here's just a friend of mine shared some of these images with me. I think it's the two images to the side. The one in the middle, I think we just pulled from our photo gallery, but the two on the side was actually taken from a tea house in Boulder, Colorado, where they were selling pu-erh tea. And you don't see that too often in the United States. So I thought that was interesting. But I wanted to just review real quickly how teas are handled and where we get green tea, white tea, oolong, black, all that kind of stuff. Basically, green and white tea are unfermented. That's the basic category. White tea is young tea leaf. Green tea is a little more mature. But at the end of the day, both forms are unfermented. Oolong tea is green tea, so it's a more mature leaf. little bit older than white. So it's a little more mature, but it's what they call partially fermented. Black tea is green tea that has been now fully fermented. And it's been, in most cases, exposed to the air, and it's been oxidized some. So black tea is fermented and oxidized. Pu-erh tea is a type of tea that is known as post-fermented. So it's kind of like black tea, fully fermented, but then they do some drying and harvesting process after that's known as post-fermented that does change the types of antioxidants you'll find in the other teas. So let me show you. Here, we looked at a bunch of different types of teas, oolong teas, black tea, green tea. First thing I wanted to show you was that pu-erh tea actually has the highest concentration of gallic acid. Gallic acid is kind of like the parent antioxidant to a lot of the other antioxidants that you find in teas, and it's why we drink teas for the benefit. So pu-erh tea, this post-fermented process, concentrates the gallic acid. Now, with that said, though, that post-fermentation process does change the total antioxidant profile, and it is slightly different from green and black tea. So here on this little table here, we've taken some averages for you. So you see green, black, and pu-erh tea to the far left. Polyphenol content, as you can see, is higher in green tea. That's expected because green tea is not fermented. You're going to lose some water-based polyphenols when you start to ferment the tea. So it's normal to see a drop in polyphenol content as you go from not fermented to partially fermented to fully fermented. So it makes sense that black tea is a little less. Pu-erh tea, because it goes through that post-fermentation process, is a little less as well. But the key thing, though, this is what was really interesting to us. This post-fermentation process, it may cause a little loss of some of those polyphenols. But remember that gallic acid content is high, and gallic acid, one of the things it does create, if in high enough concentration, is something called theobronins. And that's to this far right here where I put it in red. So pu-erh tea, because of post-fermentation, has less of those more common polyphenols you're used to seeing in teas, but because it's higher in gallic acid, that parent polyphenol, because it's high enough, it actually produces something called theobronins. Theobronins are not found in green, white, oolong, or black tea, or at least not to any real measurable level. It's really only pu-erh tea. And why is that important? Because that's the active component that talks directly to your bone marrow to stimulate significant production of all of the immune cells. And that's why pu-erh tea is so powerful. The sustanch I mentioned before, that also talked to the bone marrow. But remember, I told you it was more specific to only T cells. Turns out these theobronins in pu-erh tea is able to stimulate the entire spectrum of new immune cells. That's what makes it so powerful. And again, so this proposed mechanism of action, I'll just read you the blue box, improves bone marrow function, helping to rebuild the peripheral immune cellular components. Not just the T cells, like Sustanch did, but all of them, B cells, T cells, and even natural killer cells. So it really has this powerful effect on the bone marrow. So let's look at a couple of studies with pu-erh tea. We start with an animal study. These were male mice. So these male mice, they were called P8, P as in Paul 8. These are mice that are engineered to undergo senescence at accelerated rate. So these are young mice with immune systems that look like they're old mice, right? Senescence accelerated. And then they are compared to ones called R1. These are simply control mice that have normal immune systems, right? So PA mice, I'm sorry, P8 mice versus R1 mice. Senescent immune mice versus normal immune mice, right? So you see that setup. They were given different doses, milligrams per kilograms of ripened pu-erh extract, right? So this is not, they weren't drinking this. This was a concentrated extract with those theobronins once daily for 4 weeks. And only the P8 mice, the mice that had bad immune systems, were given this tea. And here were the results. And I'm sorry it's a little fuzzy. I couldn't get it any better from the research paper. So over here to the left, this black line is the normal mice, and it's measuring native T cells. You see here CD3, CD13R, all this. These are just normal T cells, right? These are just receptors that we know on the immune cell that make them T cells. That's it. So this is just measuring T cell percent. So you can see the black box, that's the healthy normal mice. And they had significantly more, if you look at the blue graph, significantly more native brand new T cells than the mice who had an old immune system. So the black are the healthy mice, the white here is the amount of T cells in the mice that had the old immune system. So you see that difference right there. So this was baseline. This is before we gave them the pu-erh. You can see that the senescent accelerated mice, the blue bar, they are definitely down significantly in brand new T cells. And that's exactly what you would expect. But now if you move to the right, look at the change that happened at these different doses. This was 125 milligrams per kilogram of the pu-erh extract. This lighter blue here was the 250 per kilogram, and the green 500 per kilogram. And you can see all three doses, but the main one, the main dose, the 125 milligrams per kilogram, significantly improved T cell number from the bone marrow in these mice. That is a significant finding. Matter of fact, in these mice who were engineered to have old immune systems, pu-erh was almost able to get the T cell population back up to completely normal, as you see in a normal cell. It was just a little lower. That's a powerful result. Why did the lower dose versus the higher dose? I have no idea. But I think one of the things we also always have to appreciate in medicine, whether it's supplement or drugs, right, that there's a range of therapeutic benefit, right? And when you're in that range, you get good results with very few side effects, right? That's that therapeutic dose we want. There is in most cases a scenario where if you go over, you're not getting any more benefit. You might actually be causing more harm. And so the fact that a lower dose does better, it just means this just helps to kind of narrow what that dose range will be for humans. That's all. In this study, they didn't just look at the cells though. And I was just showing you the T cells. They actually have graphs like that for B cells, natural killer cells with those same kind of results. But what was interesting in this study is they looked at something very important here besides the cell population. They looked at interleukin 6. Interleukin 6 is an immune damaging cytokine. You do not want a lot of interleukin 6 floating around your body. It's highly pro-inflammatory, and it turns out, as you can see here, again, if you look at the normal mice at baseline versus the senescent mice at baseline, notice that the senescent mice have a whole lot of interleukin 6. That happens to us too. As we age and our immune system begins to display some of those characteristics of immunosenescence, interleukin 6 levels are rising. That is not a good sign. That's a sign of a very unhealthy immune system, and it's a sign that you're having a negative impact on overall longevity. So here we start at baseline. Interleukin 6, sky high in the senescent cells, exactly what we would expect. Again, it's the 125 milligrams per kilogram, the 250 per kilogram, the 500 per kilogram of the pu-erh, and you can see the results here. significant reduction across the board in interleukin-6 from these different doses of the pu-erh. Fabulous result. Exactly what we want to see. Now, in this case, the higher doses did bring down the interleukin-6 better, but the lower dose did better with the number of cells from the bone marrow. We do believe that the right dose is probably, the human equivalent is probably around that 125 milligrams per kilogram. I think that's about 650 milligrams for humans. We think that's still the right dose because we don't want to just bring down interleukin-6. We also want to bring up the cells. So we wanted to find that dose which was a better balance. So we do think that the lower dose here in this mouse model is still the better dose, even though the higher ones did better in interleukin-6 here. You have to look at the whole composite, the whole picture. Here's the natural killer cells. Again, I just wanted to kind of show you this. Again, baseline, the senescent mice lower than the normal mice. Quite honestly, I'm surprised it's not lower here. You know, I think if we did this in a large enough, in more studies or in a larger study with more mice, I think you would see a further separation of the percent of natural killer cells at baseline. But at the end of the day, look what pu-erh did across the board, increases of the natural killer cells. Again, the lower dose seems to be the better dose here because the higher dose really didn't affect the T cells as much as we would want. So we're really manufacturing pu-erh more around that human equivalent dose of 125 milligrams per kilogram. Same thing here with a very small subgroup of T lymphocytes called CD8 cells. These are cells that play an important role in managing the activation of the immune system that come from the helper cells. So across all areas of measurement with the pu-erh, we saw significant improvement and reversal of immunosenescence in these engineered mice to have immunosenescence. That's pretty powerful. This last slide is really important to me. This is specifically looking at a type of immune cell called an SCA1. It's a stem cell antigen 1 cell. Why is this important? Why do I want to see this type of cell increase significantly if I'm doing any sort of immune therapy? Well, the more stem cell 1 or stem cell antigen 1 cells you have in your system, it is a sign of a youthful immune response that's getting ready to dump out a lot of brand new cells. So this is a good thing to have. Unlike interleukin-6 that you want down, these stem cell immune cells you want way high. And pu-erh was able to significantly, across the board, across these dosages, increase these immune stem cells. This is a very good finding that's very exciting and definitely warrants a lot more research in humans. Lastly, we're, with this kind of powerful immune response with pu-erh, we're also looking at what kind of effect does it have in tumor cells, right? We already know that even in conventional research in medicine, they're finally starting to realize maybe a better way to fight cancer is to turn on your natural defenses instead of pumping people full of poison, right? Who would have thought? So, and yeah, we're seeing the benefit of immunotherapy starting to come out. And here's what's interesting is way before the pharmaceuticals that they're now studying, we already knew that there were things in nature that could do that. We already know that there are many natural extracts that have anti-cancer properties, and we've reported on that at Life Extension. So pu-erh falls right into that. There's a lot of good mouse tumor cell lines where pu-erh was able to inhibit tumor cell growth by downregulating the growth cycle in these cancer cells. That was really interesting to me. It looks like pu-erh has anti-cancer properties, not just because it's good for the immune system, but it also is directly able to affect cancer cell cycles. That's pretty powerful. Imagine immunotherapy connected to a mechanism of action that some of the chemo drugs work on. Yeah, a lot of the poison that we dump into people with cancer, they are cancer cell growth inhibitors. They stop the cancer cell from going through the normal cell cycle, but they're so poisonous. Well, here you have pu-erh that's not only an immunotherapy, but also able to target the cell growth cycle of a cancerous cell. That's amazing to me. We're definitely going to do more research here. Here was another pu-erh study. This one was just looking at its effect on inflammation. These were 90 patients with metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, you know, low HDL, high sugar, high hemoglobin A1C, lots of abdominal fat, all that kind of stuff. And it's a pro-inflammatory condition, right? That's metabolic syndrome. And what we were able to see, so if you look at the parameters we measured here to the left, HDL, CRP, which is a marker of systemic inflammation, tumor necrosis factor, another inflammatory marker. There's your interleukin-6 as the one we wanted to come down, and here's interleukin-10. So now we're taking that mouse model and applying it to metabolic syndrome patients, right? And you can see that pu-erh was able to significantly, in a positive way, change all of these parameters. HDL went up almost 41%, and then the rest of these, the CRP, tumor necrosis factor, and interleukin-6 all went down significantly, about negative 22% or so. And then interleukin-10 is one that you do want higher. This is a good inflammatory, cytokine, immune cytokine that plays a role in just helping to balance the immune response. So you want that one to be healthy and up. So as you can see, pu-erh with significant effects on the immune system, not just from the bone marrow, but also in some of these other pro-inflammatory markers that we like to look at. I just wanted to mention one last thing here before I close up. Natural killer cell activity is something that I've been really interested in since college. My bachelor's degree is in immunology and microbiology. And I did a lot of studying of different types of immune cells. And I always found the natural killer cells to be so interesting, right? Again, these are these frontline soldiers, right? You get hit by something, boom. These guys are ready to attack, right? They got their, as I said, lock and loaded. And I just found that interesting. It's amazing cellular physiology that goes on in these kind of cells. And so if you want to just do one thing from this lecture, if there's one take-home message that I could give you, it would be to increase your natural killer cells. Bottom line. Those are your frontline defenses. You get a cancer cell that's floating around your bloodstream, which we all do. We develop these abnormal cells all the time. Bam, you got to have natural killer cells. So if there's one takeaway, boost your natural killer cell activity. And you got the reishi-T, fantastic. Make sure it's standardized to the triterpenes, and very important. But there's something else here that can do a really good job on boosting natural killer cells, and that's something called modified rice bran. This is just a natural killer cell overview. Again, these cells, these natural killer cells represent about 10% of your total immune population. They target viral infections, malignant tumors. I mean, they're ready to fight anything. And here's the key thing. They have direct cytotoxicity. They are able to just bind to a cell that doesn't belong there and just blow it to oblivion. I always loved these cells. I don't know. So that's just a nice little slide that you can kind of review on your own about these cells. But the problem is we know we lose natural killer cell number and function as we get older. So we really need to do things to boost this very important immune cell, the natural killer cell. So I wanted to talk about modified rice bran. If you look to the left here, this is a rice bran. Basically, you have the whole of the rice. You got the rice germ, where a lot of the growth comes from, and then this white rice is the food source. But then the bran is this very thin layer of tissue that separates the white rice from the hull. Well, if you take the hull and mix it with the bran, you find this compound in it called arabinoxalin. Arabinoxalin is the key compound we want from this rice, okay? we can extract the arabinoxolin from the hole in the bran, and then we add, believe it or not, shiitake mushroom to it. And shiitake mushroom has these natural enzymes that break down bran and break down this arabinoxolin. And the result are these little pieces of it. And those little pieces of the arabinoxolin that you find in the bran that's broken down from the shiitake, those little pieces act like they're perfectly safe to ingest, but the body sees them as these antigens, and it turns out they are really good at stimulating natural killer cell function. And I'm, right here on this one slide I put together, I know it's kind of a crowded slide, but I wanted you to see 3 really good research studies using the modified rice bran and the effect that they had in natural killer cell function. In this first one here to the top left, 20 healthy subjects. We just wanted to do kind of a proof of concept study. So you don't have a lot of people. It's just, did natural killer cell function really increase when we gave them the modified rice bran? And sure enough, after 60 days, 35% increase in natural killer cell function. 45 subjects with low natural killer cell activity, which was measured 1 gram a day of the modified rice bran for 4 months. In 2 months, there was a 4-fold increase in natural killer cell function. And at the end of the study, a 7-fold increase in natural killer cell function. So that's very impressive. And then this one over here is really good. 68 patients with liver cancer. So this is actually studying it in active disease. This was a 3-year randomized trial. They were given 1 gram a day of the modified rice bran or placebo. There was a 31.6% reoccurrence rate of the liver cancer in the modified rice bran group versus a 46% reoccurrence rate in the control group. That's significant. Yeah, there's still a 31% reoccurrence rate in the test group, the modified rice bran group, but compare that to, approaching 47% reoccurrence in the control group. This is a very positive study, and we definitely would like to see this study. We would like to see the research really focus, the immunotherapy for cancer to really focus on the natural killer cell. And that's something we're going to be supporting at Life Extension. So in summary, immune function decline is an accelerator of the aging process. Reversing immune function decline is possible with targeted nutrition. And at the end of the day, don't forget about your immune system. It's as important as any other pillar of longevity that you might engage in. You have to have a youthful immune system if you want to add healthy years to your life. Thank you so much. And I guess we can answer some questions now. Thank you.
I do have a question from one of our online streamers, Deb Watson, who's in Mexico. She is a medical student, and she's asking, can you elaborate on the characteristics of these plants? Do you feel the whole plant is a better option compared to an isolation of an active ingredient, which is the pharmaceutical approach? Often, isolation loses some of the benefits, or it is not significant as it has been shown in research.
Yeah.
Plant versus all the missing cofactors. Cofactors beneficial to health, phytonutrients, etc., and the whole synergistic.
Yeah. No, that I get his question. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a question we get a lot. So to answer that, first of all, there's nothing wrong. And he said Sustance, right? Well, that was the plant that he was asking about. But
no, just about the characteristics of these plants.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in general, to answer the question, yeah, I think there's benefit to taking whole food sources of many of the supplements that Life Extension promotes, the whole reishi, whole Sustance, all that's perfectly fine. And I do think you get a lot of benefit from that. However, what we're teasing out here are specific targets of immunosenescence, and so just using reishi as an example, we know that one of the characteristics of immunosenescence is the loss of the natural killer cells, right? We talked about that. Well, it turns out that there's really only one compound based on the research. Now, this is what I'm telling you is research supported. There's only one type of compound in reishi that had any effect on natural killer cells, and that was the triterpenes. So if you're wanting to do natural killer cell therapy, like maybe for cancer or immunosenescence, I would focus on an extract standardized to 10% triterpenes, because that's what the research shows is affecting the natural killer cell. If, however, you're just wanting the whole benefit of reishi, there's polysaccharides in reishi that have, fine, then do a whole base one. But again, the focus today being on that one part of immunosenescence, the natural killer cells, I was really focusing it down to actual extract, the actual standardization you need to get those effects. So this is a big question we deal with all the time: whole food versus extraction based. There's nothing wrong with extraction based if the research shows that a key compound in a whole food source is responsible for the benefit you want. That's the extract that you need to take, and that's our philosophy at Life Extension.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr.
Okay, there we go. A great presentation. Where is a good source, or where can someone get some good pu-erh tea?
Yeah. Maybe check out that slide from Boulder, Colorado. Maybe call that store. Yeah, it's tough. Pu-erh tea is not readily available in the United States. At least that could be changing right now. I think it is becoming more popular, and maybe some maybe some of your specialty tea stores might have it. I don't just have an answer for you. I'd probably just do a good Google search. But there is a store in Boulder, Colorado that has some pretty good pu-erh tea. I'm sure they'd like to talk to you.
Okay. A fantastic presentation, great information. Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One was when you mentioned about Sustanch having similar properties with echinacea. Echinacea sometimes has negative side effects towards the prostate. Does Sustanch have those type of characteristics?
Yeah, have not seen that at all in the studies yet. So that's a good question, though. I think it also, you have to understand that the different, the types of compounds that you find in echinacea and that Sustanch shares, there's about 50 different echinaceacides, and those are what those compounds are called. And it looks like Sustanch has a different profile of those compounds than the echinacea does. So they share, in general, a profile of echinacea compounds, but the ones in Sustanch are, at this point, they seem to be chemically different than what you get out of echinacea.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Then my next question was in regards to continued use. Do you overstimulate the immune system by overuse, and you should cycle it, or is continued daily use the best option?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? I think this is where we have to personalize our suggestions to people, right? Because there might be someone who overall has a healthy immune system. They're doing all the right things. Their diet is good. They're exercising. They're practicing some of the other longevity pillars that Life Extension talks about, like hormone balance and all that. Maybe for them, it is a cycling. Maybe it's, I think it's a cycling, though, that is on more than it's off. And so that might actually mean, maybe, a couple months on, a month off, something like that. Again, I'm taking guesses here. I don't have the research to support that, but cycling could be okay, but I would be on more than off, number one. Number two, I think most people need this daily. I think when you look at our lives, even when we're trying to do a good job, right? Even when we're trying to take care of ourselves, the environment today is just different. I'm not just even talking about the chemical environment we live in. I'm talking about just the stressful environment, that 24-hour news cycle. I mean, we're just constantly on these days. And that is something that is dramatically different, even from just a few decades ago. So with that said, and I know that all of those things can play a major role in dampening the immune response, I think for most people, this is a daily regimen. Okay.
Someone just told me that tea is available on Amazon. So,
Oh, great. Good. See, there you go.
yeah.
Technology. Amazon has everything, right?
Right. Exactly. So get your socks.
Any more questions?
Oh, well, one thing though, make sure if you're going to buy pu-erh tea that it does say somewhere on the front or back label that it is post-fermented. It's not full. If it says fully fermented, that's black tea. It has to be post-fermented.
One more question.
Hi, just had a quick one. There's a product from Life Extension, Immunosenescence, something that has like the mushrooms in it. Does that also have the pu-erh tea in it?
Yeah. So just so everybody is clear, as a medical doctor and as the director of education, and because I teach, like we talk about diseases and stuff, right? I'm not allowed to say product names because somebody in this audience could be working for the FDA. I don't know. I have to be very careful. But we do, the product you're referring to, because I think I heard you right, has all of these ingredients in it.
Yeah, in the right ratio.
Yeah.
Just,
So
I just wanted to bring that out.
I just can't say it.
What product is that, Audrey?
Immunosenescence. It's not the senolytic activator. It's a different one. But it's immunosenescence, blah, 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 blah.
I have the information about it because I've been taking this particular product. It's called Immunosenescence Protection Formula, and it's standardized with substantially reishi and pu-erh tea in it by Life Extension. So my question is, this is very strong. It says to take it on an empty stomach. I did that, and with very bad consequences. I ended up throwing up. And so I want to ask you what's a good dosage and how to take it in a way that is good for our, not only immune system, our gastric system.
Yeah. So the ingredient that's causing that problem most likely is the reishi, because we do have it standardized to those triterpenes. Remember we talked about that? And the triterpenes at 10% are very bitter and definitely can cause some stomach issues. So it's basically what you're going through is exactly what I went through when I drank reishi tea. And that's why I don't drink it anymore. But what I would suggest, the good news is you can get used to it. Your body can sensitize itself to it. So what I would do is I would take it with food, and I would do one every other day for like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks with food. Then I would go to every day for a couple weeks with food. Then I would go every day, but I would alternate. One day I would try it without food, one day with food. The goal being eventually you're going to get to taking it without food like you're supposed to. And if you do it that way, eventually you'll be able to get there. So with food every other day, with food every day, and then alternate with and without food every day, and just kind of wean yourself over to that every day without food. If you do that, you will get used to the reishi, and it won't really cause that anymore.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Smith.
Thank you guys.